I want to have an honest discussion about the cinema and digital media major at UC Davis. So as many of you might know, I was a computer science major when I first applied and was accepted into UC Davis. And I stuck with the major for my whole first year until I decided to change routes and go into the magical world of film. I started doing film and video a lot more my freshman year of college, which made me decide that I should do a major that pertained more to what I enjoyed and was doing. The cinema and digital media major made the most sense to me. It was a major that had production classes, and it wasn't your traditional film major, it was digital media. And I'm not saying that this major isn't a good major. It's good for a certain type of person. And personally, I didn't enjoy it. I didn't find it to be spectacular, and it's not a film school, which makes sense. You know, we're not USC, we're not, NYU. However, I guess when I heard digital media with cinema, I assumed that there would be different courses offered than are even offered, and not so much of a heavy emphasis on traditional film history and film theory. Now, again, this is just my opinion, and I'm sure other people have either similar opinions or differing opinions. Again, I'm not discouraging anyone to not come here for this, but I think that if you're in my situation, you might find yourself in a similar boat. So one of the hallmarks of the Cinema Digital Media program at UC Davis, I'm just going to abbreviate it CDM, is that there's a heavy focus on film history and film theory and very process-oriented stuff that is in textbooks. And for me, being someone that already had been doing video and doing film and learning by experience and trials by fire, it didn't make a lot of sense when I started taking these classes that ended up repeating themselves a lot. I took, I think, 3 different media classes that ended up talking about the same media theorists and the same media theories in the same way almost. And at that point, you feel like you're just taking the same class 3 different times, even though they're named different, they're worth different credits, taught by different professors. And the same thing goes with the film history. The amount of times I relearned about the Lumiere brothers or Russian montage felt very obnoxious. Once is a good amount to learn it, and by the 3rd time, I already know it, and I don't need to be told it again, especially when they're showing you the same movies. I mean, you watch the same movies sometimes 2 and 3 times throughout your whole time in that major, and I was in the major for like a year and a half, and I'd already seen these things multiple times. The other complaint I have about this major is that there isn't a way to fast track yourself if you already have the experience. So I got stuck taking some of the beginning film classes where they're teaching you how to use a camera for the first time, or use a microphone, or use a tripod setup, or lighting, which is good if you've never done it. But if you come into this major from high school and you've been doing video, or you've doing film, or you've been teaching yourself, you're going to find that you're going to be incredibly bored and incredibly held back. You're going to be knowing advanced concepts like retiming, or, audio layering, or even, multicam setups that just you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to go that extra mile because you're being limited by the lesson plan. And this makes sense. However, when I was a computer science major, if you knew how to do basic coding, you moved up into a more advanced coding class. When you knew the first thing of calculus, you took a test and you could move into the next higher calculus class. And I feel like they needed to incorporate that into the cinema digital media major. Give some kind of practical exam that, if you can pass it, then let them go ahead and use that as credit and take the more advanced classes. The other thing that I found a lot of faults with in this program was there wasn't a lot of production classes that were offered consistently and of a good variety. The classes that were offered, there were some good ones. Documentary production was a good class to take. Feminist media productions was also a really good class to take. And there were some other production classes that I didn't get the chance to take that I definitely think are solid choices, at least by their descriptions and what I've heard, but a lot of them didn't do anything for me. They didn't challenge me to tackle something in a new and exciting way. They were just reincorporating the same theories and the same devices that we've done in every other production class. There is no one ever really teaching some very specific editing techniques And I feel like a lot of times there was this disconnect with TAs as well, because the TAs were not film TAs or cinema digital media TAs. They usually came from the dance department or the theater department, and they just kind of cross-pollinated with some basic knowledge, which when you want to become someone that is doing video or film full-time, that can be really frustrating. My other big issue with this program was that it said digital media, but I felt like everything was more traditionally based. There wasn't this big push towards digital media in the sense that we're working on projects that have the primary goal of being put on platforms like YouTube or Facebook, which for someone like me, I understand digital media as using those platforms as a place to put video. And digital media, of course, is very large and encompassing, and people release short films and full-length films on these platforms now, but I feel like there's a lot of production that could have happened. I feel like the major could have catered to people that wanted to do short form content on YouTube and show how that kind of production can be made, in the sense that it's very episodic usually. How do you film something on a weekly schedule? You know, that just isn't taught. They teach you how to film something, but they don't teach you the ins and outs of, well, if we need to produce this once a week for 10 weeks, how do we do that? And there's just a lot of hand-holding, and it didn't feel very challenging, except for the few classes that I mentioned. I think those were actually good, solid classes. The other thing that I felt was a disadvantage for this whole major was with digital media, there is now the thing that I do, which is digital marketing. Especially with video. Video marketing is this huge thing, and there were no classes on digital marketing. There was no classes on using digital media in a marketing scenario. It was always in film and in TV or in, you know, Hollywood-esque ideas. And I think that's a disgrace to what digital media is, because digital marketing is very much now becoming even more and more telling stories through video to an audience, and this audience is usually very targeted because it's consumers. And there just wasn't ever a class that existed, at least, you know, during my time. And in a few years, who knows, this might change. And as someone that was experienced and knew what they wanted to do, having to take like an experimental film class where I'm producing weird experimental film that I don't ever want to make or use or think about, it doesn't appeal to me as someone who wants to actually take classes that are going to increase my knowledge base in the thing that I want to do. This major is great if you don't know what you want to do in film, because it's going to give you some options to try different things. This major is also really good if you are just beginning in film, because they're going to kind of step you through step by step how to do film. But if you're coming in with a heavy film background, I don't know if I can recommend this major to you, because it really, if you know what you're doing, I just don't think this is the right fit. If you already know about aperture, shutter speed, you know, frame rates, if you already know the differences between an APS-C sensor and a full frame sensor, if you know that there are prime lenses and zoom lenses, if you know how to set up a tripod or do a 3 light stand setup for lighting, if you know how to check your audio levels and use external recorders for audio, you kind of already know what you're doing. You know, some of the bigger things like how to write a grant proposal for a documentary, you know, that's a class that I think is important, but you could also probably go on YouTube and literally watch a video from a documentarist talk about this. And a lot of the things that you can take away from this major, I think you can just learn online or from, you know, doing it and actually getting some hands-on experience with it. Again, this is just my take on this major, and it's really not a reflection of UC Davis at all. It's just a reflection of how I felt while I was in this major. And I think that's fair for me to critique it, because I was coming from a perspective that it was going to help me grow as a filmmaker or a videographer or digital marketer. And it didn't. It didn't help me grow. It really kind of made me frustrated and held me back. So if you have questions or concerns or comments about the Cinema Digital Media major at UC Davis, let me know in the comment section below and I will respond to those as I can. And again, you can support me at patreon.com. The link is down below in the description. I am not a UC Davis student anymore, and so I am working full-time as a freelance videographer and doing this YouTube stuff as kind of a source of income now as well, an additional source, not a very heavy one. But if you have the few dollars to spare and want to support me, someone who is trying to make videos be their livelihood, go ahead and click down in the description below to the Patreon. There are some cool perks you can get. And as always, don't forget to be awesome.